In 2024, the Australia Institute is bringing some of the world's greatest thinkers to Australia to help celebrate our 30th anniversary. We're delighted to announce that José Ramos Horta, President of Timor-Leste and Nobel Peace Laureate, will be our guest in October. President Ramos Horta will be speaking at the Sydney Opera House on Tuesday the 8th of October at 6 p.m, 25 years on from Timor-Leste's historic vote for independence. Tickets are on sale now from the Sydney Opera House or via the link in the episode description.
A lot of Australians have been trained to think that without the oil and gas industry, we won't have schools and hospitals. This is not true. That's why this big lie about the backbone of the economy is so important. Because if their first threat is, if you make us pay a lot of tax, we'll stop causing climate change. Okay. So their next threat is, and then you won't be able to afford to have schools and hospitals. Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. And if you're making a list of the biggest whingers in Australia, the mining industry is surely up there at the top. In the midst of a cost of living crisis and despite not paying nearly enough tax in Australia, or really anywhere, the mining industry tried to paint themselves as the victim, launching pretty much an all-out assault on the federal government last week.
The industry is squaring up to the Albanese government over a number of issues, and things could get ugly in the lead up to next year's federal election.
Certainly no BFFs between Anthony Albanese and the leaders of our biggest businesses.
Yeah, he copped it from business. I mean, he went to Minerals Council last week, copped it from them in Canberra. He's gone to the BCA and copped it from them.
We are seeing a range of draconian policies that have been put into place that are having a deep impact on our industry.
Well, the government's clearly at war with the mining industry right now. That's what we saw last night, the sector that's so important to our economy.
We're standing up and we're saying this has gone too far. These policies need to change so that we can be competitive as an industry and contribute to Australia.
So what's this latest campaign from the mining industry all about? Joining me to discuss this question is Australia Institute Executive Director Richard Dennis. G'day, Richard.
Hey, Eb.
So, Richard, the mining industry, what has it been trying to tell Australians and the federal government in this last couple of weeks?
Oh, they're just not getting enough love. They're put upon by everybody. We all owe all of our nice things to them, and yet still people say nasty things about them. And to be serious for a moment, like this is in the same week that the woman who the Royal Commission into Robo-Debt, kind of said it wasn't my fault that we kind of pursued 430,000 people for debts they didn't owe. Like in a week where we're talking about victims in Australia, I think some people have done it tougher than the mining industry in the last couple of years. But no, they're having a sook, they're having a tanty. We aren't being appreciative enough of the foreign resources industry that makes a fortune in Australia selling our resources that we often give them for free and charge them very little tax on. We should thank them more.
We should thank them. They're really doing it tough.
They're doing it tough. They're doing us a solid.
Yep.
And really it's on us to say thank you a lot louder. And what frustrates them is they've trained our politicians to say thank you very loudly.
Yeah.
Our state and federal resources ministers are very quick to deferentially say, oh, thank you, foreign gas industry, for coming here and taking our gas for free. Oh, thank you. Now they're moving on to saying, hey, Australian voters, all of you, we need to see more praise from all of you, or else maybe we won't come and get your gas for free and pay no tax anymore.
Yeah, and so we kind of saw a bit of a coordinated assault. So last week was Minerals Week in Parliament, and we saw the Minerals Council out there kind of warning the government, don't go against us at your peril. We had BHP claiming that you know, it basically funds, I think, the whole public education system.
You're exaggerating.
Half
of our hospitals.
Half of our hospitals. Sorry. I can't keep track of all of the things that they fund. Supposedly. Are there any truth to these claims, Richard, about them more or less being the backbone of the economy?
Oh, there's certainly no truth to them being the backbone of the economy. I'll come to that in a second. Look, there's some truth to some of the claims they make about tax, but while there's some truth, there's no context. So the reality is BHP is one of the biggest mining companies in the world. And yes, it does pay, compared to you and me, quite a lot of tax. The question is, does it pay a lot of tax compared to the size of the company, compared to the size of the profits? And then there's the fact that actually of all the mining industry in Australia, big miners like BHP that make a lot of money from iron ore actually pay a lot more tax than the gas industry and the coal industry. So this is the mining industry kind of clubbing together, saying, look at us all as one big whole.
Yeah.
Literally and metaphorically, a hole with a H, hole with a W. Look at us as one big whole, and look how big our numbers are. Look how big the tax claims I can make. But the reality is the Australian economy is so much bigger than the mining industry, so much bigger than the mining industry. In reality, around 95% of the tax collected in Australia isn't collected from the mining industry. 95% doesn't come from them. And of course, the mining industry is everything from oil, gas and coal to iron ore and lithium. It's actually lots of industries. You know, they have a habit of digging stuff up. But yeah, they sometimes they want to be presented as one big homogenous lump. Sometimes they break themselves up into little things. But if you're going to look at the whole mining industry, then you have to look at the whole tax base of Australia and the whole economy of Australia. And they are small in that context.
So the Australia Institute's done a lot of research in this area, mostly trying to debunk a lot of the exaggerations that they put out there. But I'm interested in there specifically you talking about, for example, the gas industry versus iron ore. Our research has really shown that the gas industry is particularly egregious when it comes to not paying its fair share. Can you tell us a little bit about why the gas industry is not the poster child for this PR offensive from the mining industry?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well played, gas industry. You get BHP out there doing the heavy lifting for you. You know, well done. Whoever does PR for the gas industry deserves their bonus that week. But yeah, the gas industry in Australia is, you know, it's kind of unique. Australians are a very generous people, not when it comes to foreign aid, not when it comes to the unemployed, but boy, we're generous when it comes to foreign-owned gas companies. So Australia literally gives away for free more than half of the gas we export. I mean, we're givers. You know, we want to help the world through the medium of free gas for overwhelmingly foreign-owned gas companies. So bakers have to pay for wheat, builders have to pay for bricks, restaurants have to pay for pasta. The gas industry in Australia often gets free gas. So here you go, Eb, I hear you want to get into gas exports. How about I give you the gas for free? Now, if a PR shill from the gas industry was here to interrupt, they'd say, oh, that's unfair, Richard. Yes, they give us the gas for free now that you put it like that. But then we have to pay this petroleum resource rent tax. Okay, how much tax has been paid by the offshore gas industry? How much PRRT has been paid? Zero. So it's true they have to pay it. How much have they paid? Nothing. Not a cent. Oh, that's unfair, Richard. Sure, we don't pay any royalties, and sure there's a PRRT that the offshore gas industry hasn't paid a cent of. But then there's the company tax. Oh, really? You pay a lot of company tax? Well, only as much as the law requires. Guess what? Some of these big gas companies have paid zero in company tax as well. So, yeah, we're literally giving the resource away for free, and their accountants are so good that they often pay little or no company tax as well. But, hey, if you've ever been to school or hospital, apparently, thank God for the gas industry. What nonsense. What our research shows is that teachers pay more income tax, you add up all the income tax paid by teachers, than BHP, the big Australian. And again, BHP actually does pay some tax. It's trivial what some gas companies pay.
So teachers paying more than the gas industry, more than BHP, and they educate our entire workforce. Could you say teachers might have a claim to being the backbone of the economy, Richard?
No. Now that I'm going to have a go at them too. There's no backbone. Economies don't have backbones. This is a uniquely Australian phenomena. So in Australia, it's this sort of post-colonial insecurity, I think, that, once upon a time we used to think we rode on the sheep's back. Here's a hint, we didn't. We would have broken the backbones of the sheep if we had to try to ride on them. But back when the squattocracy was all politically powerful, we were told we rode on the sheep's back. Did we export a fair bit of wool? Yes. Did everyone in Australia owe their living to it? No. So the idea that there's a resource, a thing that we sell to people overseas that the rest of us should just be thankful for is really deeply ingrained in the Australian psyche. So the idea that sheep were the backbone of the economy, no. Literally, I've spent years studying and teaching economics, and I've never been in the class where we talk about backbones. There's no chapter in the textbooks. There's no backbones of economies. That was over in biology. Economics is actually about gains from trade. It's about exchange. It's about the fact that different people do different things and that it's more efficient for people to do the things they're good at and then swap their things with other people. It all gets pretty fancy when there's 25 million people in the country, but the whole point of a modern economy is that you don't have a backbone. But for political purposes, it's really powerful for the mining and gas industry in particular to say, without us, where would you be? And the answer would be, with more gas in the ground, less CO2 in the atmosphere, and financially we barely would notice.
And I think, talking about what's not taught in economics, recently when Professor Joseph Stiglitz was out here, I was talking to him.
Is he an economist?
Some might say. Nobel Prize winning economist. And we were at an event and he said, you're talking to me about, is the gas industry, paying its fair share?
Question like that we call in America a softball question. No, if you're giving away your natural resources, you're not getting any return, let alone a fair return. You don't have to do a calculation. Zero is too little. Doesn't take a Nobel Prize to figure out gas has value. If it didn't have any value, nobody would want it. So it has, as you said, $149 billion people pay with the value of the gas, and you got, for that asset, you got zero. As an economist, that makes absolutely no sense.
Former chief economist of the World Bank as well. He's kind of been around the world. He's watched rich countries get ripped off by big companies his whole life. And even he's shocked. He comes to Australia and thinks, what are you giving it away for free for?
So what do you make of the timing of this PR offensive from the mining industry?
Oh, well, there's a hint in their own headlines. They're actually terrified that we might wind up with a minority government. And the reason that concerns them is for reasons that, despite living in Canberra for 25 years, I can't explain. Successive governments of all stripes just instinctively get into power and think, I better be nice to the gas industry. I just better be nice to them. Now, why that is, we don't know. But what we do know is that minor parties and independents, not just progressive ones, even conservative independents, have kind of looked in horror and said, what are we giving our resources away for free for? So I think that the mining industry, but particularly the fossil fuel industry, is really worried that if in order for an Albanese minority government or a Dutton minority government to pass legislation through both houses of parliament, that they'd have to explain to people who aren't in their party why it is that we just have to keep giving the gas away for free, or why it is we need to continue to subsidise the fossil fuel industry. So, I think minority government really freaks out the resources industry, because the resources industry has very powerful hold over the major parties. It hasn't persuaded the public as much of this, and it certainly doesn't have that hold over newly elected parliamentarians who want to know, for example, why we shouldn't collect a lot more tax from gas and spend a lot more on health or education or insert anything else here. So, yeah, I think minority government brings far more scrutiny to legislation, brings far more voices and eyeballs into decision making. And if you're used to getting your way behind closed doors, then you probably, the last thing you want is an honest parliamentary debate about why would we give gas away for free?
So it's not the first time, Richard, that the mining industry has really come out on the attack against a sitting government. Here, there's not necessarily legislation on the line, but do you think overall that politicians have been cowed by the example, in the successful examples in the past of the mining industry really kind of going for the throat of government?
Oh, absolutely. And, while I think the political power of the mining industry is overstated, it's certainly a lot greater than zero. And if the perception of power and power are related, you bet a lot of politicians don't want to get on the wrong side of the fossil fuel industry, or they do want to get on the right side of it. Let's be clear, it's a very lucrative place to go and work when you're finished in Parliament.
A lot of ex-pollies end up in the mining industry.
A lot of resources ministers, let's be honest. Like the people whose job it is allegedly to kind of look at resource policy on behalf of all Australians, do such a good job of it that apparently the mining industry are like, quick, why don't you come and work for us now? Good to get to know you. So both the power is real and clearly for some the incentives to go and work for them are real. But I still think it's dangerous to overstate their power. So, for example, the Rudd government had a mining super profits tax, which was, there's a hint in the name, designed to actually collect more tax from the parts of the mining industry that were making super profits, far more profit than they usually would. So, for example, when the war in Ukraine started, when Russia invaded, the price of oil went through the roof. There was super profits being made. There were windfall profits being made. And, the idea is, well, that's exactly when you should be collecting more tax. Australia should at least share in the bounty of, watching the price.
Well, because it's not like they're doing their jobs extra well or being extra productive.
No, and we tell workers all the time, you can't get a pay rise unless you can show you've been more productive. Oh, world price of oil just doubled. I think that should all be mine. Just stuff it in my pockets. So, sorry, I still haven't quite answered your question. When Rudd was Prime Minister, he proposed this resource super profits tax. But to be clear, by that stage, the Rudd government was well and truly on the slide. He'd done a backflip on a carbon price. He, once said climate change was the great moral challenge. And then he went, oh, yeah, no, politics are a bit hard. I might drop it. So this was a kind of a weak Rudd government that was really failing on multiple fronts. And at that point, the mining industry showed up and ran a big campaign saying, oh, this mining tax is a terrible idea. Kevin Rudd lost the prime ministership. And of course, the mining industry are like, look what we did. We did that. That's what happens when you cross us. But arguably, if Rudd had have actually stayed the course and, done more on climate or done more other things, or perhaps just, not had a government that had the troubles it had. Don't forget they'd gone through the GFC. It was a tough time to be in government. But yes, history, or more importantly, the journalists that write about history for us have said it was because of the mining tax. Well, it's obviously in the mining company's interests for everyone to believe that. But having lived through that period, I'd suggest there was a bit more going on than that.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, at the time, the mining tax was actually very popular.
There's a big policy announcement from the Queensland government that those 50-cent public transport fares are here to stay. Energy rebates, rego freezes, fare caps now, the state's swimming in debt. How are you affording all of this?
So we took the difficult decision to increase coal royalties on coal super profits, and we're using those to deliver back to Queenslanders. And when I talk to Queenslanders, they say that's what they want.
I'd like to ask, why do you hate mining?
Of course they want to pay less taxes. I don't begrudge them for that. Everyone does. But I am determined to make sure they pay their fair share of royalties to Queenslanders. At the end of the day, we own that coal and we sell that to them. The price we sell that to them is our coal royalties, and they cannot be dug up twice.
And of course, not all political leaders are cowed by the mining industry. And I'm thinking here of the Queensland Premier, Stephen Miles. That government introduced a progressive coal royalty scheme. So along those lines of super profits, as the coal price rises, so does the amount of royalties they pay. And that's actually, working pretty well despite a scare campaign from the Queensland Resources Council and others. What lessons are there here for politicians in Queensland?
That it works, that it's popular, that it's good. And there's not only just lessons from Queensland, there's lessons all around the world. Like, let's face it, in most resource-rich countries, they actually collect a lot more tax on their resources than we do in Australia. I love saying in Norway, they heavily tax their fossil fuel industry and give their kids free university education. In Australia, we subsidise the fossil fuel industry and charge our kids a fortune to go to uni. So the choices being made by the Queensland government resemble the choices being made all around the world. And of course, the resources industry pushes back. But to be clear, the Japanese government has pushed back as well. Like in a very rare intervention, the Japanese government is saying, we don't like domestic Australian tax policy. It's not good for the 100% Japanese-owned coal companies. And by the way, we don't want you to tax gas either. So to be clear, Australia is currently a plaything of other governments and multinational fossil fuel companies. They come to Australia to get the free resources in a low-tax environment and sell them at enormous profits. And whether it's the Japanese government or US and UK fossil fuel companies, they're not at all shy about putting pressure on Australian politicians. But let's be honest, we need politicians that are just brave enough to push back, as Stephen Miles and others have been in Queensland.
So we are headed towards another federal election. And so I guess to wrap up today, I wanted to ask, what's at stake here if governments and political parties fall into this trap that the mining industry is trying to set them, basically ruling out that we'll do anything, well ahead of the federal election? What are the costs involved if we stay on this current course?
Well, let me just start somewhere slightly different. Usually when you have these big corporate campaigns, it's like, if you tax us like that, we won't do that thing anymore. Well, when we're talking about the fossil fuel industry, it's not much of a threat, is it? If you make the oil and gas and coal industry pay tax, we'll stop mining coal and gas and oil. Okay, good. Sold at that price. Actually, what the science says is we need to stop expanding fossil fuels. So if the threat from the fossil fuel industry is if you tax us, we'll stop doing the harmful thing. Okay. Yeah. Really shouldn't be much of a bluff. The reason the bluff works, to go back to the earlier point, is that a lot of Australians have been trained to think that without the oil and gas industry, we won't have schools and hospitals. This is not true. That's why this big lie about the backbone of the economy is so important. Because if their first threat is, if you make us pay a lot of tax, we'll stop causing climate change. Okay. So their next threat is, and then you won't be able to afford to have schools and hospitals. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. And by the way, if we're talking about banning new coal mines and new gas wells, do you know how many people work in a gas project that hasn't been built yet, Eb? None.
No people.
Do you know how much tax a coal mine that hasn't been built yet pays?
0.
Right. So what's the actual threat? What are they actually saying? But, they're so big, they're so loud, they're so confident, they spend so much of their profits kind of bombarding the Australian media and the political class and through ads, voters directly on this misinformation that Australians are actually sort of scared of what should be a non-existent threat. So to be clear, the world is going to transition away from coal and gas. The question is how quickly. As other countries buy less coal and gas, guess what? We'll be selling less coal and gas. We will be getting out of coal and gas no matter how much our political class loves it. We will be getting out of coal and gas no matter how much our media loves it, because other countries are getting out of it. The question for Australia is, how much money can we grab off them before they go away? So, the fear campaign is really just a very profitable strategy to hang on to these enormous profits for an extra couple of years. That's it. They're just playing end game. They're haggling about how far away the end is, but every year they can drag this out as a profitable year, and they're afraid that the Australian government will act as bravely, for example, as the Labor government in Queensland have, which is, well, hang on, why don't we just grab some more for Queenslanders? And if you listen to Stephen Miles, spend more on hospitals, spend more on subsidising public transport. Let's get more money from the coal industry and spend more money on nice things. This should not be a politically tough job to sell. And even though the Labor government federally is like, no new coal mines, no new gas, that's just a slogan, not a policy. Well, no, that was their approach to uranium mining for many years. We know, we banned whaling, we banned asbestos. You know, we know how to fix these problems, and the Queensland government showed us there's a lot of money to be made fixing them.
Thanks for joining us, Richard.
Thanks, Eb.
As you'll have heard before this episode, Jose Ramos Horta, President of Timor-Leste and Nobel Peace Laureate, will be visiting Australia as a guest of the Australia Institute in October. He'll be speaking at the Sydney Opera House on Tuesday the 8th of October, and tickets are on sale from the Sydney Opera House now. You can find all the details on our website or at the Sydney Opera House website or in the link in the episode description. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the show today. You can reach out to us via email at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au, or you can find us on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.